Welcome to another Commonwealth Conversation. This is We Virginians. I am Ryan Gilchrist. Today we're discussing the court system and the way the coronavirus pandemic has impacted that. We have a couple of esteemed trial lawyers with us today who also happen to be Virginia state senators. Senator Mark Obenshain, a Republican, represents the 26th district, which includes Harrisonburg and the surrounding community. Welcome, Senator Obenshain.
Well, thank you for having me. Good to see you.
Senator Scott Surovell, a Democrat, represents the 36th district, which encompasses portions of Fairfax, Prince William, and Stafford counties. Welcome, Senator Surovell.
Good to be on your show today.
As always, my co-host is Marisa Porto. She's the executive in residence at Hampton University and a longtime newspaper editor and publisher. Hello, Marisa.
Nice to see you all today.
We have had, you and I, several discussions about the court system, and I know there's a lot going on with that. I don't think we could have two better sources to find out what happens next than Senator Obenshain and Senator Surovell. Take us away.
So I'd like to ask the senators today, we've been closed since April. The courts have been closed and then just opened this week. Can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening behind the scenes to get us to this week, to get us to a place where we can open back up, at least somewhat? And I'll start with Senator Obenshain.
Well, I'll offer you what insight I can provide. If you really want to go behind the curtain, you're going to have to get a member of the Supreme Court of Virginia to walk you through what their process has been. But I'm a trial lawyer, litigator. I handle a lot of probate litigation, also some serious injury and wrongful death litigation. So most of my work is in the circuit courts, trial courts of Virginia, the courts of record. And I can tell you that everything really shut down back in the beginning of April with the declaration of a judicial state of emergency. At first, really virtually all discovery ground to a halt. It was kind of a challenge being able to even get in touch with other lawyers, much less with the court. All of the proceedings, whether they were hearings, trials, depositions, were placed on hold. And that has definitely thrown the trial bar into a bit of uncertainty and turmoil. I think my brethren who have substantial practice in juvenile and general district court really probably even have more uncertainty than I do about how they're going to catch up. I was with a general district court judge the other day who was bemoaning the absolutely enormous backlog that exists in his court, and he was pointing out that the Chief Justice had admonished the general district court judges to work hard on catching up, but don't go overboard because it's really important to make sure that all parties really have access to real meaningful justice, and through justice, as one of the judges used to call the rapid fire justice process, it isn't really equipped to provide litigants with a full hearing on their cases. So with that, I'll let Scott offer whatever perspective he has.
Thanks, Mark. And so my practice is basically in all three courts. I go to circuit, general district, and juvenile court. And I also, I practice in about 5 or 6 different courthouses here in Northern Virginia. So Fairfax County, is the largest jurisdiction in the state. We have 16 circuit court judges, 10 or 11 general district court judges. Is the audio coming through all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. And, I would sort of say there's two things. First of all, there's what's happening in court and there's what's happening out of court. When this first hit, you had a lot of, at least in my divorce cases, there was a lot of conflict on child custody schedules, and people were fighting about what does this all mean in terms of who gets the kids and how does the schedule get impacted. There's a lot of businesses that had a lot of questions initially, had legal problems, ended up calling us. There's a lot of contract, what we call force majeure clauses that have come into question. A lot of people are calling in like, what does this all mean? And we had nowhere to go to get answers to it except to just try to work our way through it without a court to go to. In court, Mark is absolutely right. The courts have basically been shut down except for emergencies. There are, the bond motions are proceeding. If people have a liberty interest, if they need to get out of, if they've been locked up and arrested, they have a right to a bond hearing. If there's like a child custody emergency, they can get a hearing. But short of that, the courts have really been shut down. And behind the scenes, the judges have sort of been, at least up here, been working with a lot of stakeholder lawyers trying to figure out a way to restart things. And in some cases, trying to figure out ways to keep some of the volume moving without being in a courtroom. And that's not an easy thing to do. So we're getting there.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Scott, but I've had, today I had a telephonic hearing in circuit court where both parties appeared by telephone. Judge ruled on legal argument. Of course, we're in a little bit of a different boat if we have witnesses who are going to testify. But about a week ago, we did a mediation that we did from remote corners of the state. This format, we did it over Zoom. Had a judge in Petersburg who was our mediator. My client and I were here in Harrisonburg, and defense counsel was in Richmond, and it really worked great. And what I think that we're going to see is a lot more experimentation, a lot more innovation, and we live in a society in which we do a pretty darn good job of adjusting to meet challenges. And I think the court system, although maybe a little bit slow at times and deliberate at times, we're going to see some changes in the way that it works.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did my own Zoom mediation last week too. There's been a lot of Zoom mediations going to keep things moving.
Have there been any other opportunities for you to innovate in the court structures besides Zoom meeting?
Well,
the most practice I think is going to change. The Fairfax County Circuit Court just issued guidance yesterday that they're going to be conducting their Friday motions by video conference, and it's going to completely restructure how we do motions. I don't think anybody's comfortable with the presentation of evidence electronically yet, because I could be cross-examining a witness right now, and you could be reading off a script or having somebody standing behind the camera watching you, and it's also important in a courtroom to be able to assess somebody's credibility, to be able to see their full mannerisms and not do this. But I think you're going to see probably a lot more hearings conducted electronically, obviously over the next 2 months, but going forward, I bet you see some changes. Like, for example, I could see us doing writ panels at the Supreme Court like this, Mark. I don't know about you, but some arguments where you don't need evidence, but this works well.
Yeah, and I think all those are good changes for the most part. I think that there are certain cases and certain motions where it's important to be there in person, but your Friday motions hearings in Fairfax are a great example. Fairfax is unique in any number of ways, but their motions practice is especially unique. For me, I practice in courts all over the state. It seems like I always have a case in Fairfax, and if you have a case in Fairfax and any motions that need to be filed, you can only have one heard at a time, typically, and they're heard on Friday. So a lot of times I spend every Friday in the car driving to Fairfax and driving back for a 15-minute motion, and I think it's going to make the practice of law more efficient. There's no reason why most of those motions, not all of them, but most of those motions couldn't be handled in a format like this. Supreme Court has long been holding telephone writ hearings, but you can always opt out and request an in-person one. But I think we're going to see that more often, particularly in cases with no actual evidence that's being reported. I think there are going to be cases where there is going to be evidence submitted, testimony by witnesses, in which the parties may agree that it should be heard remotely. And I don't see a problem with that as long as parties are in agreement to it.
I wonder, there's been a lot of conversation around different aspects of the coronavirus, and I wonder what the implications from a court judicial system are for public records and open meetings for when these changes happen. Could maybe Senator Surovell, can you speak to that?
Yeah, you know, first of all, the Supreme Court still hasn't blessed starting jury trials again. We're still, I think, at least probably 2 months from a jury trial happening. I mean, nobody really understands how we're going to sit 12 people in a box and keep them 6 feet apart where they can sit there and watch a trial. And so jury trials are still suspended. You know, a typical Fairfax County traffic docket has between 100 and 200 people on it. And they're trying to figure out how to move between 100 and 200 people through a courtroom in the way they used to, where the lawyers and the police officers, everything efficiently went. It's not possible. And you're gonna have to see a complete restructuring of our traffic dockets. The General District Court, the first return dockets for like the low dollar civil matters or the evictions, you know, typically in Fairfax, you'll see 100 people in that courtroom. They don't know how they're gonna handle that. Right now, all of our courthouses up here are requiring everybody to wear a mask when they come in the courtroom. But given that it's a courthouse and you're compelled to come, if you can't afford a mask, it's kind of hard to, they're trying to figure out how to get everybody a mask so they can just enter the building, or if they don't have a mask, how to let the judge know not to enter default judgment or issue a felony failure to appear against them for not being in the courtroom because they didn't have a mask that day. So there's a lot of different things like that we're trying to get through right now.
Well, and another issue is access to the records of the court. And that has long been a source of frustration for me. I've practiced in federal court about as much as I practice in state court. And in the Western District of Virginia, for the past 20 years, every single filing that we make is required to be electronically filed. And it can be searched electronically. The Virginia courts are literally 20 years behind the federal courts in electronic filing, and there is tremendous inconsistency around the state. And if one thing changes for the better as a result of this, I hope it is a move to electronic filing so that parties can file and that the public and people who have a interest in these public records have actual access to it without having to go into the courthouse, go into the clerk's office, and try and figure out how to get around in these court files, some of which are decades old.
Is there anything, staying on that for a moment, and I'll ask you to sort of keep your lawyer hat on for the moment and add the one that puts you in the legislature as well. Is there anything that needs to be done at the state level, on a policy level, to facilitate that? Obviously, the capability of electronic records is there, but whether the will has been or if it's just simply a matter of things not moving along quickly enough, what needs to happen to move that along? Because it sounds imminently possible.
Yes, it is absolutely eminently possible. It is a complicated issue that I wish I had a simple solution to. You know, in Virginia, we have different branches of government, different political entities. And in addition to the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature, we have different constitutional offices in Virginia. So just like cities and localities are political jurisdictions, actually every circuit court clerk in the Commonwealth of Virginia is a separate constitutional entity. while they may fall somewhat under the control of the Supreme Court of Virginia, they are a fiercely independent lot. And trying to get the clerks and the Supreme Court on the same page has been a tough nut to crack. And I'm not suggesting that either is to blame for that, but somehow, some way, we've got to figure out how to get them aligned on the same page and frankly on the same software platform in order to be able to make this uniform across the state. Because right now, some courts have electronic filing, but in order to have access, for example, if I want to have access to even minimal electronic records in Fairfax, I have to pay something like, I don't remember what it is, like $100 a month in order to have that. I might have to pay that in 20 different jurisdictions around Virginia. And that's a high price for access to public records.
Yeah, I know.
Surovell, yeah, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was once talking with the Chief Justice, Don Lemons, about this, and he pointed out to me that they've estimated that something like 1/3 of all square footage in our courthouses are taken up storing paper. So we could probably go not building another courthouse in Virginia for probably a few decades if we would just adopt this electronic filing system and make this stuff accessible. But Mark nailed the analysis as to what the holdup's been. It's a lot of the 130 clerks and trying to get them squared away with the Supreme Court's been hard.
Senators, you said that there was a backup. I believe the number is 673,000 cases across the state that are backed up in court, and we're still not in a place where we can examine those cases and go through the process for those folks who are involved in the cases. What does it take to be able to get that backlog taken care of for the Commonwealth? I guess either one of you could start there.
All right, Scott.
It's going to take a lot of coordination and a lot of work and a lot of patience. Moving, I think it's probably higher than that now. I mean, that number is probably about a week or two old. The number when we're done is probably going to be closer to 1 million cases.
Mm-hmm.
And, already we're starting to get notices about, well, we'll set some shorter trials. Just be aware that we might bump you a day or two out because under our Constitution, the criminal cases have speedy trial rights and they take precedence over anything that's criminal. And there's a lot of other cases that become emergencies, whether they're custody emergencies or support emergencies, rules to show cause, and they'll end up trumping other things in the docket. So it's just going to require a lot of hard work and a lot of patience by everybody because we not only have a bunch of cases that are already currently set on the docket that might have to move, but we got to take all this stuff that was delayed and somehow slip it in and meet our constitutional requirements. It's going to be really complicated. And also with the social distancing restrictions, a lot of the dockets are going to be very slowed down. We're not going to be able to move our cases through as quickly as we usually can or we're usually able to. So it's going to be hard.
Yeah, it's important to remember that the real workhorses of our judicial system are the General District Court and the Juvenile Court. I mean, not that our Circuit Court judges or Supreme Court justices don't work hard, but the General District Court is kind of the people's court in Virginia. I mean, small claims, non-felony criminal matters, all are heard in General District Court. And Juvenile Court, of course, deals with all juvenile offenses and many domestic cases. And that's where most of the backlog is. And these are largely people who are unrepresented, who are confused by the way the judicial system works anyway. And I think it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of patience and by everybody involved in the judicial system to get the juvenile and domestic or juvenile and general district court case backlog resolved. I think that the circuit court backlog is probably going to work itself out a little bit faster than the other courts.
Mhm. I would like to know, we sort of have a sense of what's happening now in the court system. We have the sense of sort of what you think might happen in maybe, another couple of months, but what's the long-term impact of the pandemic on the court system in Virginia? Senator Surovell, we'll start with you.
Well, most of my colleagues had no idea a judicial emergency could ever exist before. When that order came down, everybody was just dumbfounded. Wait, the court can suspend deadlines, even statutes of limitation? I didn't think that was legal or possible. And so I think it's made people a lot more attentive about the fragility, I guess, of the legal system, and also its importance. I mean, I don't think a lot of lawyers even thought that they might have like 2 months of their cases, or 3 months of their cases just wiped out for the year. And so people are going to have to think a lot more about it. I mean, long term, I think covered it a little bit with the video. We're going to see a lot more of these I think a lot more use of video and depositions. I think we're going to see a lot more use of video and mediation. Probably we'll see some video motions. I also think that, at least it's taught me in terms of the business of law, that my employees don't really need to be in my office in order to work. And actually, Senator Obenshain and I were just talking about that last week, about whether we need to have our paralegals right next to us all the time in court. I mean, it sort of opened my eyes about the amount of square footage I need to pay for in order to keep an office open. So I think it's going to decentralize a lot of things.
Senator Obenshain.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with anything Scott said, with the exception of the statute of limitation thing. I can tell you one thing. I didn't let any statutes of limitations blow by in reliance upon any judicial emergency order. And I hope that a lot of lawyers didn't. I rely on those orders, but only so much. I do think that we are going to see some evolution in work practices, not just in the legal setting, but across the board in corporate America. I've been maybe more experienced in that than most, and Scott and I share the distinction of being lawyer legislators and having to go to Richmond and juggle the legislative duties with the duties of a law office. I mean, I have a small law firm, and I have to practice law when I'm in Richmond. So I'm used to practicing law remotely. My clients think it's kind of neat to have a legislator as a lawyer, but not so neat that they want to put their case on hold for 3 or 4 or 5 months in order to have that distinction. And I also have had a paralegal who worked remotely from Colorado for 4 or 5 years. And those concepts are not foreign to me, but I think they're foreign to a lot of lawyers. And I think that lawyers are seeing that they and their staff members can actually operate, carry caseloads, service their clients with a little bit more flexibility than they thought they could.
Well, you both are legislators, and you're going to go back in the session next year. What do you see coming out of this experience that you think will end up as a proposal for a bill in maybe January of next year? Senator Obenshain? That's a good.
Well, Scott's the idea man, and he's probably got half a dozen or a dozen of those ideas already committed paper. I'm not quite sure. I think that it's important for us to emerge from this, to talk with our colleagues in the bar and figure out best practices, what didn't work and what did work well. And, there are a number of organizations that Scott and I are both members of that are stakeholders in this process. And, I think that the Virginia Bar Association, Trial Lawyers Association, Boyd Graves Conference, many other organizations, really need to get their heads together, and I look forward to working with them to see what legislative fixes and changes that we do need to make.
Senator,
Tell us about your list.
Yeah. So Mark's right. I do have a little bit of a list, but it's mostly not court stuff. It's mostly other things. But I think we're going to see a huge pile of post-pandemic legislation. On the court side of things, the only things that have come to my mind so far are there's been a lot of confusion about evictions and what happens in an eviction scenario when this kind of a crisis happens. Also with foreclosures, because in Virginia we have what's called an extrajudicial foreclosure process. That is, banks foreclose on houses without going to court, and the only way to stop the foreclosure is to go to court. And so I think there needs to be clear remedies there. So if you're losing your house and you need to go to court, you can. Other than that, I think the court system so far seems to be functioning okay. But once the dust is all cleared, I think we'll have some more people coming to us with more ideas of things they think need to be fixed. And outside the legal side, there's all kinds of stuff that needs to happen that I'm sure we're going to be talking about for years. So be plenty of work to do.
Well, I think one thing that both of us can agree on that maybe we can team up on is trying to fix this electronic filing system. So I really don't care what others think. I think we really need that, and 20 years overdue.
Yeah.
well, I want to thank you both for coming today. It's been an interesting conversation. We could probably spend another hour or two just chatting about various topics related to the court system, and then the rest of the day on everything else related to the pandemic. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for your interest.
Thank you all for watching. If you've watched this far in the video, please consider giving us a like and subscribing to this channel. More interviews coming with We Virginians. For now, thank you again to Marisa, Senator Mark Obenshain, Senator Scott Surovell. We appreciate your time. For those of you watching, thank you as well. We'll see you next time.
Have a great day.